Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Scott. Welcome back to LA Not So Confidential. I am here with my bestie and co-host.
That is me, Dr. Shiloh. Welcome to LA Not So Confidential.
We are so excited to be back. We've had an amazing week. I was traveling all over the place. You're getting ready to travel.
Yeah, I'm leaving for Miami tomorrow morning.
And I just came back from the Blue Ridge Mountains with my family, which was awesome. That was totally cool.
Yes. Yours was vacay. Mine's work.
Yeah. Mine was great. Wait, you're going for work?
Yeah, I'm doing a conference.
Oh, I can't even keep up with you.
But the only thing I can think about is when can I get some time away to go visit Versace's mansion?
Oh, wow.
So I'm going to try to get out there.
Yeah, you got to get a picture in front of that, definitely. That's so cool. So, gosh, so much going on. Another couple of things really cool that we'll get to, a couple episodes from now. That's very exciting. That's wonderful. That amazing things can happen when you work on a podcast, and things that we never expected, and it continues to grow. And like we've said in the past, we just so value our listeners, because we wouldn't be able to do this or have as much fun if we didn't have wonderful listeners.
It's the best.
It really is great.
Just the ways in which we engage with different stories and the things that we're all interested in, that's bringing us together in the first place.
Yeah.
But I love kind of the back and forth when we're just putting out an article or something interesting.
Yeah.
And feel like we're having these little intellectual social media conversations.
Yeah, and you guys, one thing I wanted, once again, I always want to express how much gratitude we have for our listeners, which is just constantly amazing to me. It's please, if we haven't responded back to an email, we will get to it. It's kind of increasing. We're getting a lot of emails and chats and posts, and we just appreciate every single one of you. It's just going to take us a while to get back, and what we try and do, because there have been a couple of things that have been, I wouldn't say emergencies, but we've had some people in need reach out to us, and what we have done is try and triage those
emails sometimes.
Yeah, and try and get people to resources if that's indicated. We do really want to ask, I'm going to be a little bit grubby here, please always consider giving us a high rating on iTunes. There's a practical reason for that. If you're here, you probably like us. The practicality in getting a great rating on iTunes is that it benefits us in the long run. It knocks us up in ratings, and it gives us the opportunity to pursue more content and kind of further our work. And
if you really like us, leave a little comment.
Yeah.
Not just a rating, but leave a review. Let us know what you like, what you want more of, and what you want less of.
You want less of, which we've gotten a couple. So I have to share. So the thing that I want to clear up very clearly is that we each have a bottle of water in front of us. In the past, there have been probably 3 episodes where we've been at my house and we weren't driving, so we knew we could have a couple of glasses of wine. We're not able to do that right now because we're in a location where we have to drive home. However, we are not eating, we're not chewing into the camera. This is just what you get when you're doing a podcast on the fly, because we've gotten a couple of reviews from people that I may be a little concerned that you have some misophonia going on.
Me?
No, not you. I think a couple of our listeners
Explain what that is.
Well, misophonia is a really strong emotional reaction to certain sounds or noise. And one of the biggest triggers for people with misophonia is mouth sounds.
Oh, I think we've talked about this before.
Yeah. In fact, when I worked in prison, there was a guy that tried to use the excuse that for getting off murdering his cellmate, that he was misophonic, and that the chewing sounds were just too much for him. So
wow.
I'm sorry. We do what adjustments we can, but
if you want some hilarity, go read some of our recent reviews.
Yeah, there's
what we're talking about.
Go down to the couple of 2-star reviews, and it's pretty funny. It's pretty funny.
All right, so we are here today because we are talking about killer athletes. We're going to highlight a couple of really big cases, but this is just another facet of really celebrity and crime, which is always super interesting. The sports world is just another aspect of that. And so I think when we started off kind of prepping for this and how we wanted to attack it, if you will, one thing that pops up to me with celebrity and sports figures is just, do they feel like they're above it all? And sort of the ego in which, in common language, we kind of talk about ego. And would you agree that celebrities are sort of a self-selected, narcissistic group in a way?
I would say a subset of them definitely fits that category, but I can't paint with a broad brush. I mean, I can't paint with a broad brush, as a person who worked as a producer and a casting director working with actors who have gone, who started off from certain backgrounds and training and went on to become, there's people I gave their first jobs to that are doing really, really well. And I think it runs the same spectrum as the general population, that basically so much of it has to do with the solid parental parameters and having mentors and role models. And as a young developing individual, you are held accountable to higher parameters, which should be the standard for every child and every parental system, whether it's a single parent or a couple parent. Now, that being said, I do think that celebrities and athletes or celeb athletes live in a slightly different world. One of the things that happens in many of the big paying pro sports, like just to use mainly basketball and football, is that many of these young men are egged on. They show athletic talent and prowess. And what happens is that is pursued and pushed by maybe coaches and parents and peers to the detriment of developing other skills in their lives. And I'm not going to paint a broad brush, because sometimes I'll hear people, some of the athletes talk, and I'm like, damn, that is an insightful, really deep comment, and that's based on like an understanding of philosophy.
Right, very well-rounded
absolutely.
Sure.
Like Aaron Rodgers, like every time that guy opens his mouth, it's like, damn, that is like, he is not just a one-faceted individual, and we shouldn't assume that they are, right?
I'm surprised you know the name of a professional football player, Scott.
Well, come on, if you know which one that is. If you know what Aaron Rodgers looks like, how could I not? That is a good-looking dude.
Are you a fan of any sports? Like, have you ever followed or like had one that?
Not really.
Was something you're into?
If I was going to follow anything, I would follow hockey. Like the few live hockey games I've gone to have been absolutely exciting.
Hockey in person is so much
because
fun.
You're right there. It's not like being on a football field in a huge stadium or anything.
True.
But anyway, just to take it back to to round out that discussion, is I think that anytime an individual is in a rarefied situation, you live in an echo chamber, much like we talk about delusions or people that are, integrated fully into belief systems as you kind of self-select. And, one of the things that will happen with, like, especially in the music industry today, more so than ever before, is surrounding yourself with this crazy entourage and a bunch of yes people, that there's no one there to say no to you. And I think that is really unhealthy, because it's while you're succeeding in your art or your sport, what you're not doing is you're not having an experience of failure that's actually real. That's what us people here in the common world, we fail every day.
Right.
And that's great, because when you fail every day in even minuscule ways, you develop resiliency and you move forward.
Right. So they're at the level where really we're talking about a level of wealth where you're having these hangers-ons, people that are your yes people, or they see the potential for the wealth to be there too, or to be just sort of a pseudo-associated with the celebrity. It's been really interesting in the last several years to see a lot of celebrities coming out and talking about their struggles with mental illness as well.
Love it.
I mean, there's been a slew of essays written, and Michael Phelps is doing therapy commercials and things like that. But there is a huge stigma in athletics, and predominantly because of it being very male-driven and not wanting to exude any weakness, of there being a stigma of asking for help, or if you can't handle your stuff, that you're somehow less than in a field that you're supposed to be able to handle everything and be at the top of your game. But yeah, there's just been a ton of professional athletes opening up about their struggles with mental illness. The Players Tribune is it's a professional baseball like online magazine, and Derek Jeter a couple years ago had collected 26 personal essays by male and female pro athletes who had struggled with all kinds of stuff: childhood trauma, substance abuse, depression, suicidality, just some really gripping stories, and put them out there. And I think that was a big push as well. But it's really neat to see that shift in a profession where it's not happening. Very similarly to how I see it in law enforcement now, where we're talking about some of those things.
Yeah, I remember several years ago, I don't know if you may know this actor. He's never really hit it huge on the big screen, but Dominic Purcell is an Australian actor. Like, just this, he's like a brutal-looking guy, like a big, handsome, beat-up face, very fit. And he's been around forever. And he was in Prison Break. He had done a lot of things before that, but that was his big thing. And now he's a series regular on Legends of Tomorrow, which is a CW superhero show. And he always plays a gruff guy. I mean, I've never seen him play anything sensitive. He does have a great comedic sense, so he can do comedy. But it wasn't, and I was listening to a podcast where he was being interviewed about his struggle with panic disorder. And it's even as a professional, I mean, here I am, I buy into who I think that this individual is just based on the parts that he plays. And here he is opening up about how absolutely debilitating his panic attacks were, and how anxiety just, really impacted his life. And I love that he said that. And he's like this big guy that other men would be able to go, oh, if he can talk about it, then I can talk about
right.
it, So I love the fact that athletes are coming forward. And I think it also, has such a great impact on younger athletes, because the pressure to succeed in so many sports, while we love it, we love watching those games. We love, I love watching gymnastics, and yet part of me now knowing what the training that those young women have to go through.
Right.
It's like I have really mixed feelings about it.
I do too. I think about just if we're just physically looking at like what they're doing to their bodies and suppressing development because of their rigorous training schedules. I guess at that level, something's got to give at that level. But
it's a complex conversation right there, especially when we talk about younger athletes
Sure.
making decisions.
Sure.
Whether it's going to be something that ends up being CTE or TBI
Right.
later on, or whether it's a young woman who is so athletic premenstrual that she then delays her menstrual cycle, which has a lot of sequelae down the line, has a lot of consequences,
Yeah.
But they should be allowed the choice.
Right.
Or should they? I don't know. It's a big conversation.
Yeah, their brains aren't even developed to make choices and weigh consequences.
But we demand that. What is it? The male brain doesn't really finish developing till 26 now,
Yeah,
I think is the latest.
yeah, mid-20s.
And yet we're more than happy to send our young men and women to
Right.
war and to do a lot of things. But that's another conversation.
Exactly. So in honing in on homicide and murder, I looked at the three big professional sports here in the United States and was able to find some really good lists and databases that have been kept. So really, I kind of looked at the last 20 years. I had to go back a little further with some organizations, but so for the National Basketball Association, I was only able to find one professional player who had been convicted of homicide, and that was all the way back in 1991. Lots of drugs. There's lots of drug DUI convictions with all of the professional sports teams. But for the NBA, I found one homicide. For Major League Baseball, there was one from 1991, but it actually happened in another country. This player named Julio Machado, he actually shot a woman after a traffic accident in Venezuela. He claims it was self-defense, but he ended up being convicted and he served 12 years.
Wow. And
then the other Major League Baseball player who was convicted of a murder was back in 1948. So Blackie Schwamm, he killed a doctor, a Long Beach doctor, as working off a debt for mobster Mickey Cohen.
Wow.
So that sounds like a very interesting story. But he was sentenced to life in prison, and he served time at San Quentin. But even though he received life in prison, he did end up getting paroled in 1960. So 2 for MLB. And then we get to...
Which is still statistically higher. I mean, like, if you're looking at all these examples, that's statistically higher than the general population of non-athletes.
Right.
So it is significant.
I think so. We get to the NFL. So I looked at a very comprehensive list from the last 20 years. The crimes that really stuck out in NFL, lots of guns, lots of drugs, lots of intimate partner violence. And several DUIs. But there were, aside from, obviously we're going to talk about Aaron Hernandez later, aside from him, there were 3 pretty brutal murders, and they're in the last 20 years. So year 2000, a lot of people might be familiar with Ray Lewis. He was accused of murder in the stabbing deaths of a couple of men outside of a club in Atlanta on the night of the Super Bowl. Wow. And he ended up, there was a big crowd, and he ended up pleading all the way down to obstruction of justice and got 1 year of probation.
What the hell?
He went on to win the Super Bowl and MVP the following season. That crime still remains unsolved. So I don't think necessarily that he was the perpetrator in the stabbing, but obviously was there when it happened. It was kind of rounded up and initially accused. In 2001, Jeremiah Parker, he was accused of child abuse in the case of his girlfriend's 4-year-old son, and this happened in Halden, New Jersey. And essentially the boy ended up going unconscious after being shaken by him. The mother was also accused, and he was convicted of endangering a child. He was acquitted of manslaughter because I think they couldn't determine necessarily if it was him or her, but he was sentenced to 10 years in prison. So that falls more under child abuse, death. But I think the most tragic of these 3 is in 2012 when Jovan Belcher of the Kansas City Chiefs, he fatally shot his 22-year-old girlfriend, Cassandra Perkins, 10 times in front of his own mother, who was there essentially watching their child. He flees the scene. He takes off, drives to the Kansas City Chiefs team facility, and steps out of the car with a gun pointed to his head. And he's met by Chiefs general manager Scott Pioli. Belcher tells him that he murdered his girlfriend, thanks him, and basically says, will you take care of my daughter? And he's joined by Chiefs owner Clark Hunt comes out, and they're negotiating with him to drop the gun right there. And then you can hear the sirens. The sirens are getting closer, and basically he kneels down by the car, makes a sign of a cross, and shoots himself in the head.
Wow.
So very tragic. There were 3 others, but they were vehicular manslaughters as results of DUIs. But just some really sad, tragic cases in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that really requires some exposition or at least note in this conversation is, while this is controversial, and I have some controversial opinions about this controversy, but look, in the NFL, especially today, I'm not an expert on football positions. I know very little bit about it, but I know that linebackers have the heavy lifting. If they were in the gaming system, there are tanks, right? So they have to be big. They have to be very big. And let me tell you, no man naturally reaches that weight. And look, we are all, anybody who watches football or supports this, and I'm not judging you, but we have to understand that we are all complicit in that. We are part of the system that requires these games become ever more exciting. So now we have, as opposed to 180-pound guys 100 years ago playing football, we've got 300-pound guys rushing into each other with this unbelievable amount of force. And because they've been enhanced by the use of steroids. And the best doctors in the land, making sure their livers are clean and giving them the right supplements and the right food. But the steroids are doing the heavy lifting. And the steroids have an impact in the male physiology regarding impulsivity, anger, irritability. I'm not opposed to them. I think that we should take a European view. Like the European, in many European countries, you can buy them over the counter. They also have a lot less abuse because it's just sort of understood in the community. Here, we don't. I don't know, and I don't know what the right thing is, but I do know that if we're pumping these athletes up to these unbelievable weights, and then they're engaging in these crashing, traumatic brain injury or CTE instigating injuries,
right.
We're going to see some impulsive behaviors and crimes as a result.
A big result in all of those areas: cognitive, emotional,
absolutely,
behavioral. Right.
Emotional lability, emotional instability, but the impulsivity too. All that, I'm kind of motioning to the front of my head now, but like that injury to the prefrontal cortex and the place that we have executive functioning that allows us to take a step back from our impulses and like take a breath and think about something before we act.
Problem solve
is one of the first things that goes in those injuries.
Right. Before we get into our two big cases, did you have anything else historical or sort of overview you want to? I
did. Rather than end with them, I do want to talk about a couple of, I think, fascinating cases. One of them, bear with me, just have my former life as a performer and my advanced age. There was a singer, dancer, actress. She's still alive, but she was really big in the 60s and 70s, named Joey Heatherton. Willowy, unbelievably sexy, blonde, really gifted dancer. And she was on the variety shows. She never really hit it big in movies or anything, although there were a couple of things. Her father was a performer who was very well known. But she married Lance Rentzel, and Lance Rentzel was a very, very famous football player, and on his way up. And he was like the all-American blonde god. Just this really handsome man. And he was caught twice in a car masturbating in full view of children. And it wasn't that he was masturbating and trying to hide it. He was purposely seeking out young girls around the age of 9 to expose himself to while he masturbated. And it ruined his career, rightfully so.
As it will do.
But it was really rough. He tried, as far as I know, we're going to get into more about defenses. Like one of the defenses they used, and this is like, in 1970, the defense they tried to use in the trials was that he was overwhelmed with anxiety and depression after seeing 2 movies, one for each event. So the first event of exposure was after reading the book 1984. That was so devastating to him that he just had to go whack off in front of a kid.
Right.
And then the second incident was after watching the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey. So
movies named after years or books named after years.
I did not make that connection. Okay, that's interesting.
He has a very specific trigger.
Really? Okay.
To masturbating in public.
Wow. Okay. 1917. He should really not go see that movie.
No,
he's 70 years old now. He shouldn't go see it. But
wow, and a horrific crime that we think of, another worst of the worst, a sex crime involving children.
Exactly, and even though it's a non-contact offense, and there was a big lawsuit, it affected his career. And likely, it was with the LA Rams, and even after one of the events, now this is what's interesting about how our culture has changed. Is Lance went back to play for the LA Rams, and of course got completely reamed by the audience. They were like yelling, "No pants, Lance."
Oh my God!
They had tons of nicknames for him, but that was the "No pants, Lance." I thought it was really interesting. I do want to read something that was fascinating about how the psychologist looked at it at that time. So I'm going to read the quote.
Yeah.
And I wanted to put it by you because you're still closer to that milieu than I am, being a decade out from us working together in that field.
Sure.
Lance's book, Lance wrote a book. It's a straight autobiography, not just about those two events. But not necessarily justifying it or making excuses, but he does talk about some of the stressors in his life. But there was a theory at the time put forth by the psychiatrist that men like him, coming from a rough background, he had some parental stuff, that he was trying to prove his masculinity. And so this was an exertion and a way for him to retake his masculinity, that somehow he had been emasculated by, of course, his mom, and that especially flashing at young girls or old ladies who would be the ones supposedly most likely to show a reaction. And it's interesting because in his book, he talks about he's having really sadistic coaches at the time that were really bad. They would work players until they'd pass out on the field because you thought, well, this is how you toughen them up. Well, no, that's how you cause organ failure, by doing that. But the idea was that this was all about him working out his sort of developmental issues about his parents and reclaiming his masculinity. So what say you about that, Dr. Shiloh?
I'm a little suspect of that. It sounds a little too Freudian for what is probably just a compulsive, deviant sexual interest. Especially that
Does that make him a pedophile?
So,
he's still alive. We're not diagnosing.
No.
We're going to say that. But a person in that position, does that make them a pedophile?
So you would really have to drill down to what is arousing about the behavior. So is it the public masturbation piece, or is he aroused to the children? Are they the thing that's arousing to him, and then he's then choosing to masturbate right there in front of them?
So what part does the reaction play? Like, is this an attempt to get a reaction from that particular population?
Sometimes it is about the reaction.
Okay.
Sometimes it's just such a compulsive behavior that it's anxiety relieving.
Okay.
So I think I would lean more towards, if he didn't have any post-pubescent victims, that he might be more pedophilic disordered. That would be really interesting. I just don't think there's enough information to say they might be. It may be he just likes masturbating in public, and so he's an exhibitionist, but they're an easy sort of target or sort of victim. It's not that they're necessarily children or aroused to children.
Right.
So it could go either way. But
I love that. I mean, I love the fact that you don't have a definitive answer.
No.
That what we're doing is we're talking about that there's a lot of diagnostic elements here to look at. And, this guy is now 70 years old. He's led a quiet, retired life. He's gotten out of the limelight. Hopefully he's gotten some help.
Sure.
Hopefully there have been no more offenses. But that's very interesting. And so looping on to that, the next one that I was going to get that's a little more recent is, and it's related to football, but it's not a football player himself, is Jerry Sandusky. So that...
Oh, boy.
Yeah, you and I, we had some big reactions to this. And I think for different reasons. I mean, having both of us worked in that area of sex offenders is one thing. Understanding the motivations, understanding the abuse, which was really bad.
Right.
What was disturbing in the Sandusky case, and for those of you who are not aware of Jerry Sandusky, he was a coach, football coach at a major university, Penn State. He was the defensive coordinator, and he was well known by one portion of the population as being like this amazing father, granddad figure to all of these poor foster boys.
Red flag. Red flag.
Big red flag right there. And what was happening actually was that he was not just molesting them, it was full-on sexual acts.
Sure.
On a consistent, chronic basis, a number of them. I mean, just numbers and numbers of counts. So that in itself is horrible. The bigger context of horror for me that relates to sports as a whole is how there was a cover-up.
Right.
And everybody knew about it.
Right.
Everybody knew about it. In fact, coaches, like there are coaches that were in the trial process that I easily diagnosed as being traumatized. Like there was a redheaded guy, I can't remember what his name was, but I remember him being interviewed and being on the court, the tapes of him being on the stand, and he was having trauma responses because he was in the position of not being able to do anything. He went and reported it.
Right. Is he the one that walked in on it in the shower?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and was so horrified.
Right.
But then here you are, you're witnessing this horrific act, and his career, you know, he has responsibilities, he has a job, he's told, shut up, ignore it, whatever. A lot like something else, another one of our elected officials right now who is going to go down big time when all that comes out about his former coaching days. But to me, that was the bigger thing, is the cover-up.
Right. That the money that the organization produces is more important than any victim.
Right, which leads back to...
or these players that are being, you know, that have... are being injured over and over again and suffering greatly
because they're part of
what?
a machine. Because they're part of a machine. They're fodder for a machine.
Right.
And it's more about the university that's making money, or the NFL, or, you know, making just unbelievable amounts of money.
Crazy money.
So those were the two that I found really interesting. I mean, there's more when we go just even beyond homicide. There's fraud, forgery, theft. You know, Pete Rose's betting.
Yeah, insider trading. Yeah.
Michael Vick's, you know, I mean, there's something that we both know. It's part of that triad of like not understanding that doesn't matter what kind of animal it is, but like dogs, we have such a connection with in our Western culture. The idea that you could engage in that kind of behavior really tells you about where that person's mindset is.
Well, all of this evokes the reaction when we find out about it, like with any other celebrity, where we go, man, they had everything.
Yes.
Why would they XYZ fill it in? And I feel like that's what today's episode is about, is the why. Like, yes, here's these horrific things that happened, but we really want to look into what are the factors that possibly led to it.
So, yeah, and like Jerry Sandusky, why? He's driven by sexual desire and by his paraphilia. Sure. His desire and his crimes are then supported by turning a blind eye, creating an echo chamber where on some level he's got to know that someone has tacitly endorsed permission to continue in this behavior, right?
Yep.
So he continues in it. What's different in the example of Michael Vick is that, like you were saying, that example of Michael has everything. He didn't need money.
No.
Like, why are you doing this? So there's something about, I would go so far as to say that there's something about the stimulation that he gets from either watching that kind of destruction or a sense of power over the people that he's pulled into it.
Right. Yeah.
Just shooting from the hip there, yeah. So, did you want to start with Aaron?
No, why don't you start with Oscar?
Okay. So we wanted to use two examples. Dr. Shiloh is going to hit with Aaron Hernandez, which is hugely in the milieu right now in a lot of ways, and we'll mention those. But I wanted to go back a little bit further and talk about Oscar Leonard Carl Pistorius. In 2015, well, it's a fascinating story for a number of reasons, and I get to share with you a perspective. Like I said, I love being wrong and being corrected and cranked open so that I get more information, and this is absolutely one of those examples because I was studying for licensure right as the crime had occurred, and I had a study mate that gave me a perspective. But so Oscar Leonard Pistorius, he is a 34-year-old South African professional sprinter and convicted murderer. He was found guilty in 2015 for murdering his girlfriend, his live-in girlfriend, Ariva Steenkamp. They're both South African. The fascinating thing about Oscar Pistorius' backstory is that he was born with a congenital absence of a fibula in both of his legs. It's a condition called fibular hemimelia, and it means that basically there's a deformation in the lower part of the leg so that certain bones just are not included in the package when the baby comes out. And it's not able to be corrected by creating other appendages or moving bone from bone, especially in an infant. So as he was hitting toddlerhood, right between toddler and infancy and toddler, it was advised to his parents that his legs should be amputated between about halfway down the shin below the knee, and then be fitted with prosthetics. And because of having the full thigh and the full knee and a good part of the fibula, that he would be able to have really great mobility. Well, nobody knew that basically he would go on to become a really kind of amazing athlete. So even as a middle schooler, or the South African version of middle school, he was in a private boys' school, he immediately excelled in wrestling, all sorts of calisthenics, rugby, water polo, and it was even noticed that one of his coaches that was interviewed years later said that it wasn't until 5 months into working as a coach in the high school that he even realized that Oscar had prosthetics.
Oh my God, what drive.
Seriously. And supposedly he had
incredible.
Wonderful support. Oscar was very close to his mom. He suffered an injury to his knee that was really going to affect him playing rugby and some of these other sports. And one of the coaches said, "I really think you should concentrate on track." And then basically where he was doing well before, he literally just exploded. And this guy was clearly a talented runner. And a consultation of coaches got together and realized that he would do better if he was given polycarbonate blades to run on. So after a couple of tries that did not work so well, he was given a couple of blade prostheses that didn't really work well. He was given these cutting-edge prosthetics that were made here in America, and he learned to use them as an athlete so well that he immediately just shot through the ranks, not only in the Paralympics, but he also had a legal case because he wanted to compete in the fully abled Olympics.
Right.
And he did,
But then there was some question: does he have
an advantage? And there was a lot of controversy about looking at, even if the measurements are exactly correct, so that that blade is not longer, that would give him a slight advantage, is the spring coming from it going to give? There are all these factors they looked at.
Sure.
And ultimately they decided that it was not giving him an advantage. He's just really an amazing athlete. So I could go on and on and on, but we don't even have enough time to talk about all the awards he won.
Wasn't his nickname the Blade Runner?
The Blade Runner, right. Yeah. There was some controversy. He got a little pissy one time when there was a controversy about another parathlete who was using blades as well, and he kind of threw almost like a Tanya Harding stink, kind of complaining and demanded that runner's blades be measured to make sure that he didn't have an advantage. Ooh. So on one hand, he's also a very nice-looking man, very athletic, handsome, clean cut, and he has this beautiful model girlfriend. So, on one side, there's this image of him sort of being this, golden boy. And what they were hiding was that, he had a temper. And he would have fits of anger and a lot of arguing with his girlfriend. He was charged at one time with discharging a weapon, for having a weapon where he wasn't supposed to. And then one night, while living with his girlfriend, he woke up, believed that there was an intruder in his home in the bathroom, pulled out his gun from the nightstand, and shot 4 times. It was then discovered that it was his girlfriend, Reva Steenkamp, in the bathroom. She was immediately deceased from the 4 shots. And, his excuse was that he woke up in an anxious mood and thought that there was an intruder. And the trial system itself was a circus.
It was so interesting to watch from
very
here.
interesting, because there was charged with these charges, and the charges were knocked down, and then the judge was called to task because her reasoning was really almost comparable to what the judge said about the supposed what's the one we were talking about, the kid, the entitled kid.
Oh, affluenza?
The affluenza. It was
I think
almost
that's
like
going to be our next episode.
it should be. We should dive deep on that one. So the outcry against the ruling came back and caused them to go back and add additional time to him, and he was. I'm always careful about how we judge people's presentation in court.
We talk about it all the time
right.
here.
But there was a big change. He was very stone-faced the first time. The second time, it was almost like he had been coached to be dramatic,
right?
And crying and sobbing. And then one of the defenses that came up was that he had an anxiety disorder, and that the anxiety disorder was directly related to him sort of being impulsive and losing his ability to reason, and he was groggy and scared, so he grabbed the gun and shot it. Now, so here's where the interesting twist comes in for me, is that...
Because before you go there, I know that from afar, our view was, yeah, right... Okay, it was an intruder. Your girlfriend's spending the night there. She can get up and use the bathroom. What a great opportunity to say, if you really wanted to shoot her, or if you did out of a fit of rage, to use an intruder theory that it was mistaken identity.
Right, but if it was rage, then there would have been intent, because he would have waited till she was in the bathroom.
Right.
He's lying in wait almost, right?
Yeah, for that opportunity.
Exactly. So that's something that you can go down that pathway and examine. But I have a really good friend here in LA who is a marriage and family therapist. She's fantastic. And she is from South Africa, and she was my study partner for licensure. And I remember during a study break, we were talking about this, and I was like, oh my God, this guy's so guilty.
Right.
And she goes, well, wait. And I was like, Gilla, you got to be kidding me. She goes, no, wait, you need to understand about our culture. And I was like, oh, wait. That's right. It's on the other side of the world. There's all sorts of different things. And the way she explained it to me was really compelling. And what we don't understand, we see a lot of violence in the U.S., and we have some street violence, and we have gang violence, and we have intimate partner violence.
Loads of gun violence.
Lots of way too much gun violence.
Right. Violence against women.
However, what Gilla explained to me is that there is a lot of political and racial unrest in South Africa still. And that she said, what you don't understand, and what I wish they had explained in the news, is the layout of the homes in South Africa. It is so dangerous after dark. Each home is a compound. There is a tall, solid wall around each home. It generally has barbed wire on the top.
Whoa.
Metal gates, and each home is 2 stories. So your casual living area is on the bottom floor, where you might be watching TV, have a den. However, at night, when you're going to bed, you go upstairs, and it gates off the bottom floor from the top floor, because home invasion is one of the major crimes that occurs there.
So the sun goes down, and every night is like the purge.
That's the way I felt like she was describing it.
Right.
I mean, that was I
lockdown.
I checked into her, so I was going to see if I could get her to be interviewed. She was busy this week, so she wasn't available. And it's been, 6 years since we had that conversation. But
that sounds terrifying.
It sounds absolutely terrifying.
Especially someone with money and celebrity. Again, they're going to probably be
They're extra vulnerable, right?
And because of their vulnerability.
So she goes, please understand that, the vigilance that you have living in this apartment in a very safe neighborhood with 2 doors of security is very different from what they live with there. And I was like, okay, I can kind of see it. Like, I could see that possibility. I don't know if I completely buy into it,
Right.
but it did lend some weight to
sort of the anxiety and the
right. I mean,
environment.
so it's not that like anxiety was the reason that he shot her. Like, oh, I'm having a panic attack, I need to just shoot my gun. It was more about maybe an underlying low level or high level constant anxiety about safety.
Sure.
So you're hyper vigilant. You wake up in the middle of the night, you're groggy. But, you know, you can, like people with anxiety who have sleep problems will wake up from a dead sleep and their heart is racing and their body's awake, but their brain is not awake.
Right.
So I'm not defending what he did. I'm just saying that is a very interesting supposition. And the case was appealed in 2014, and they had lowered, like in 2014, the judge had given him, they had moved it or acquitted him from premeditated murder and gave him a lesser charge of culpable homicide. What would the American version? Would it be second degree manslaughter?
Yeah.
Probably manslaughter. Yeah. But then, of course, there was a huge controversy resulting in 2016. They had to give him an additional amount of time. So he had a couple of falls in jail. He had been eligible for parole. That was revoked. But really, the original sentence that got extended upon was only 6 years, which does seem incredibly short for the skimpy defense
Sure.
that was put out there. So he got out, I think, for 4 hours on October 14th in 2016 to go to a funeral service for his grandmother, which I think is pretty great. I mean, I love that the system does that. I know we used to do that in the U.S. I don't think that's ever done anymore. So he is still in prison. He is supposed to be a model prisoner. I think he was always very religious or presented as very religious and has sort of a ministry within the prison. So, you know, he's keeping his nose clean. But, yeah, it's an interesting case.
It is.
And I don't know, you know, we don't have a lot of background on, you know, was there sort of an abusive relationship. But we do know that he had a hair trigger. He would tend to argue.
Right.
You know.
Maybe a bit of a temper there, but no glaring factors of, okay, we saw this coming.
No glaring factors, except, I mean, one of the things I would say that I don't know if it's directly related, but I find fascinating is what he accomplished is so representative of such drive.
Right.
Like, amazing, unbelievable drive. Like, I try and wrap my mind around having that kind
with our able-bodied legs,
Yeah.
and I still wouldn't be doing that.
I can't even do my crunches, and I'm somewhat abled.
Right. Should we hear a word from our sponsors?
Let's hear a word from our sponsors. We're going to be right back, folks.
So I went to the restroom on my break, and there were some detectives in the hallway talking about old sex cases that they're opening up as cold cases and DNA, and I was like, I want to be in this conversation.
Oh, cool. I didn't know where you were going with that.
So I was in the bathroom, and I'm all dressed like casual today because I'm off, so I definitely couldn't insert myself into that conversation. They'd be like, who are you?
Well, it also just would be creepy as hell. Like this strange woman, like, what?
Yes?
What are you talking about?
Tell me more.
That's so cool.
All right. I am going to talk about Aaron Hernandez, ever popular right now, like you mentioned earlier. Majority of my information is going to come from the wildly successful podcast by the Boston Globe and Wondery called Gladiator, and then the subsequent documentary on Netflix right now, Killer Inside the Mind of Aaron Hernandez. Both are fantastic. I am certainly not going to do them justice and sort of rehashing what they did, but what I'm going to do is kind of relay the story in a timeline, and then I really want to focus on factors, kind of the thing everyone's talking about after this. I also today started his brother's book.
Oh, wow.
And got through the first few chapters about their childhood.
Okay. I can't wait to hear that. I have to say, there were so many people at work that had watched the documentary, and everybody was having big reactions to it. Like a lot of conflicting, like a lot of very spirited discussions about a lot of it, which I thought was very interesting to have that much sort of reaction to it.
Yeah, I reached out to one of my best friends from grad school. She came out here from Boston, hardcore Pats fan, like to the nth degree. And I texted her today and I said, hey, as a fan, but also a forensic psychologist, she's like a leading forensic psychologist in New Hampshire now. How did you feel about all this when this went down? Because I didn't pay any attention to this, honestly. I mean, I thought, here's some dirtbag guy that made it to the NFL that, whatever, had gang ties and got in trouble for this thing. And that's about as much attention to it I gave to it. And she said, it sucks as a Patriots fan because he was so good, but he gave the team such a bad name, and there was this disgrace that sort of enveloped the whole community and the fandom. But she's like, brain injury, not an excuse. He's clearly antisocial.
Well, so that's the thing that I'm so glad to have her perspective.
Me too.
I think that's fascinating because like you were saying, I'm not a sports fan really.
Right.
And I remember coming into it at the trials. Really, it was already at the trials because it was like, otherwise it's just a couple of crimes, which is horrible to minimize, death. But I remember by that time when you would see pictures of him, and my impression was, I looked at him and I'm like, oh, he's got shark eyes.
Oh, interesting.
Like, I just remember going, no, he's got
dead.
He's got that dead lack of expression. And what I found interesting, though, is as you're watching, and they need to do filler on the news and they show pictures, there was light in his eyes as a teenager that clearly went out. Now, I don't know what the reasoning is. I don't know what the motivating factors.
I got it for you.
Okay. But clearly, there's an affect change in him.
Adorable. I mean, just those dimples and that smile, and
it's also like a lift in the eyebrows. Yeah. Like there's really a complete facial muscle activation.
You're right.
And then later, like that is gone.
Yep.
And to me, I do think that was related to the CTE.
Sure.
Some of it, at least.
Yeah. This is a case where there are many, many factors, and it really was the perfect storm to lead to where he ended up. And so who is Aaron Hernandez? In a very quick nutshell, he was born into a football family in Bristol, Connecticut. His father played at University of Connecticut and was just a force in the town. I mean, his nickname was the King.
Wow.
And he had a brother that was 3 years older than him, and both excelled in football. Aaron excelled in other sports, basketball as well. But at 17 years old, he ends up going to the University of Florida to become a Gator, which is football big in the South, Scott?
I occasionally hear about this thing between Alabama and Auburn. I think it may be a thing.
Yeah. So
it is next to religion in the South.
Football at the University of Florida,
along with pageants.
Well, ooh, killer pageants. Huge. Like at 17, he's just going to this massive football empire. And he's All-American there, and then he doesn't even finish college and gets drafted to the NFL by the Patriots. Again, talk about an empire.
So
at the age of 20.
Right. So laying down the path already is we've got somebody with an underdeveloped brain, as we all have underdeveloped brains. God, I can't even talk today. Being pushed into this like immediate celebrity, rocketing almost overnight. Although he laid the groundwork.
Oh yeah, he was a phenomenal athlete.
He's a big guy.
Big guy,
and not getting there naturally. By the way,
probably not.
Yeah. So once again, what I was talking about earlier, I really believe that was a factor. It's not a factor in everybody. There are some people that can control their irritability and anger and like understand it.
Sure.
I don't think a kid necessarily has the skills to do that.
So let's go through the crimes that he is connected to, and it is more than just a couple of crimes.
And when does it all start?
So he goes to the NFL in 2010 at 20 years old. We don't see, okay, so September 30th, 2007, he's still a Florida football player. And there's two men that end up shot in Gainesville, Florida, outside a club. Aaron is one of 4 football players from Florida who are questioned about this. He was never charged, but he was definitely a person of interest because the victim ends up describing the gunman very much matches Aaron's description. That witness then recants. So that ends up getting closed, not closed, but unsolved, and they end up the case goes cold because the witness doesn't want to talk anymore, and it sort of ends there. So that's 2007. Fast forward to 2012, he's now in the NFL. So July 16th, 2012, 2 men, Daniel D'Abreu and Sefrino Furtado, are killed in essentially a drive-by in Boston's South End, again outside a club. They were 2 very stand-up guys, just hard workers. One had actually been a police officer back in his home country. I forget where they're from, maybe the Dominican or something. Police initially had no suspects, but they had a pretty good vehicle description that was caught on video. And it turns out, as they're reviewing the video from the club that night, they go, "Oh, look, Aaron Hernandez was at this club same night." Kind of this like, "Oh, there's a celebrity."
Oh, wow.
And there was sort of this joking of like, maybe Aaron did it, but the detectives are doing their job, and they're like, "No, just because he's there doesn't mean he did it." But interesting. About a month after that murder, both of those men die. About a month after that murder, Aaron signs a $41 million contract with the Patriots.
Damn.
Right. About less than a year later, February 13th, 2013, Aaron flies his friend Alex Bradley down to Florida to go party. The next morning, Alex is found shot between the eyes.
Ooh.
He's alive.
Oh, my God.
There is audio of the cop talking to him saying, "Who shot you?" And he literally has a bullet hole between his eyes, and he won't say who shot him. Meanwhile, Aaron took a flight back home, and this guy refused to talk. The detectives say, "All right, you can be a victim of shooting and you want and not talk. That's totally fine." And he ends up calling Aaron and says, "Nice job, you didn't kill me." And basically wants to take care of it himself. Doesn't tell the cops that Aaron shot him, but reaches out to Aaron and says, "I'm coming." This guy was like a hardcore criminal.
Oh, okay.
Now you've crossed me.
Oh,
sort
wow.
of thing.
Okay.
Turns out this guy...
what was his background like?
Drug
trafficking,
sales and stuff like that, guns. He was with Aaron the night at the club that those 2 men were killed. So he was he was out partying with Aaron that night. So essentially you can start to see he's the link between Aaron and these other murders, and now he's saying Aaron tried to kill him with this setup of taking him down to Florida and shooting him. So a few months later, June 17th, 2013, the body of Odin Lloyd, who is a semi-pro football player, is found in an industrial park very close to Hernandez's home. They were acquaintances. They were both actually in long-term relationships with sisters. So Aaron's live-in partner, who's the mom of his child, was the sister of this victim's girlfriend. They weren't married to the sisters, but they were in long-term relationships with them. And a couple weeks later, Aaron ends up being arrested for Mr. Lloyd's murder. So it's very eerie leading up to his murder when he is announced as a person of interest and the cops want to talk to him. There's actually news footage of them following him in his white SUV on the freeway. Mm-hmm. And very OJ reminiscent.
Wow.
There was no pursuit going on, but here the media is sort of following in a helicopter overhead. And he drives to the stadium, which is reminiscent of the football player I talked about earlier. Goes inside, they basically shoo him away, and he goes back out and then goes to his house, and then he ends up getting arrested. But the the information was out there. The press was kind of onto it that he was going to end up being arrested.
I don't know if that's directly a parallel to the other event that you talked about, but like that the stadium would represent some kind of safety or home or...
Yeah, I think so. I think it really seems like, and I know Aaron felt that he was particularly close with the owner of the Patriots, to where there's sort of this pseudo father figure.
Right. And certainly a better father figure than he had.
And with the other person I talked about at the beginning of the episode, talking about like take care of my daughter and things like this. So there is that pseudo relationship there. So the day after he's arrested for Odin Lloyd's murder, investigators from the double murder in 2012 in Boston start to go, oh, wait, he was arrested for a murder with a gun and he was seen at the club where this happened. So they suggest that he might be connected to that, and they're going to start investigating it. And then grand jury hearings start for that Boston case soon after that, and he does end up getting indicted for those murders as well, while he's still waiting in jail for the trial to start for Mr. Lloyd's murder. So while they're doing this, they end up doing a search warrant on his cousin's home because he spends a lot of time there. And guess what they find? In her garage is the SUV that was caught on video from the first one that's just been sitting there for a year.
Wow.
She's been hiding it out for him. So going back to the murder of Odin Lloyd, there is a shit ton of evidence. I mean, he was not very savvy at all. I mean, bullet casings, his own home surveillance footage of him coming home that night with two other people and holding the gun, and just not the smartest criminal.
Right.
Killing someone that and doing it very close to your home, all of that. There's cell phone records. There's a ton. So at some point while he's in prison awaiting trial for both of these, he is also then indicted on a charge related to the shooting of his friend that he took down to Florida. So his friend finally ends up coming forward because he ends up being a key witness for the two men that were murdered.
This is already so complex.
Yeah. There's a lot. It is very complex because of sort of the timeline. But essentially we're talking about, several different shootings. I mean, if you include the one when he was still in college that he was questioned about, we're talking about 4 different shootings he's connected to. So he does end up going to trial for the murder of Odin Lloyd and is convicted on April 15th, 2015. He gets life in prison without parole. So he does get indicted for the case against Alexander Bradley, and then he's waiting trial for the 2012 shooting. They end up finding a shank in his cell, so he gets moved to isolation at that point. And then for his second trial, he retains noted Florida attorney Jose Baez, who represented Casey Anthony.
Oh, wow.
So
I'm sorry, I've said "oh wow" like 5 times now because it's like, oh wow.
Right. So that seems to work out for him because he gets acquitted. Jose Baez once again works his magic and gets Aaron Hernandez off for the murder of the 2 men in Boston. And 5 days later, he's found dead in his cell. He was 27 years old at his death. So here we are with a case of a man who's involved in a lot of suspicious, connected, serious crimes, leaving a wake of victims behind. But we really get a peek with these documentaries and podcasts and book of what life was like for him and these factors. And I think the one that's easy to look at is looking at the brain damage. Because it's pretty jarring when they do sort of the postmortem examinations of his brain to see that as a 27-year-old man,
how much damage there was. Yeah,
it looks like a dementia patient far into their disease. So the picture side by side of a healthy brain and a brain with CTE is just it's pretty jarring to see. But I think there's a lot more to that. We'll come back to CTE in a second. One factor which we always see with people that we end up treating in the prison system, their social influences, right? And whoever they're hanging around with, if they are not even easily susceptible, because we're all susceptible to influence from our peers.
Absolutely.
But Aaron was someone who he ended up playing with a team in the NFL that was very close to home. So he still was able to go back home to people from his childhood and from even his college days. And a lot of that was spent with some unsavory characters outside of his primary family. But when he spent a lot of time with his cousins and at her house, that's where he met a lot of these people. And we're talking like he was high all the time. He talked
That's what I
about
remember reading.
In high school,
Yeah.
in college. It's evident in some NFL games that he was not put on the roster that day, probably because he failed a drug test. They wouldn't say that. They would say he didn't prepare himself enough to play today. But he admitted that he was high almost every time he stepped on a field, which is incredible because you think, what would he be capable of if he wasn't?
Well, but then again, I mean, going back to Oscar Pistorius and the idea of the impact of anxiety, an addict at the point, maybe they don't start out with what it later becomes a comorbid issue. Maybe they do it for peer pressure or for whatever reasons you start using substances. But at that point, if you're a daily user, you're self-medicating something, even if you're self-medicating the tolerance that you have now built up. And do we say that weed and THC are addictive? There's a lot of controversy out there.
Sure.
However, anything can become addicted if it's based on self-medicating
Right.
an existing issue, which might be either organic or characterological.
Sure.
So maybe that's what was happening. It sounds like from some of the family stuff you're about to talk about, there was a reason he was self-medicating.
Right. So we have the possible addiction issue or substance use issue. We have the social influence issue. You also have a lot of family dynamics and / abuse, I guess, is what I would categorize this. We could tease it apart, but they all kind of go together. So there's a lot of recounting, especially from his brother's book, about their dad's drug use, and how that would play out at home, whether it was being incredibly strict with the boys or abusive with them, to where he's holding them up off the ground with one hand and spanking them with the other, to having an electrical cord from the end of an appliance and plunging it into their scalp.
Oh, my gosh.
Because he's just annoyed with whatever they're doing. Like some awful stuff. And then between the parents, these boys are witnessing some severe abuse. Mom putting out cigarettes in the dad's forehead, him bashing her head to the kitchen or into the bathroom sink until she's slumped over. Just awful stuff. But then as they're starting to get older and perform at top of their game in high school in football, dad is incredibly loving and just, I'm so proud of you. I could hold you guys forever. I never want this night to end, when they have these amazing games together because they're playing on the same team. And so now it's all about pleasing dad and filling these really good moments. And the brother actually paints some really lovely, cute family evenings sometimes, them all watching movies together.
Right, but look,
the duality of what they're experiencing.
Exactly, and it makes absolute sense.
Talk about anxiety provoking.
Yeah, I mean, well, being in a position where you're afraid that mom or dad is going to revert back to what they were before, but also the more thing that's insidious is to look at the fact that, mom and dad didn't change intrinsically who they were just because their sons became successful and started exhibiting amounts of talent. They changed their behavior because they recognized a narcissistic extension developing and identified with the successes of their children.
Absolutely.
So, we see it negatively in stage moms that, are trying to live, or stage dads, they're trying to live vicariously through their children's successes.
And where does that leave the kids?
In a desperate need to keep that self-medication happening.
Right.
Getting mommy and daddy's love.
Validation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have this going on, and then when Aaron is 17, his dad goes in for hernia surgery and dies. So now you have this point in their life that you were just explaining, where father figure is now gone. His brother is already off to college, close by, University of Connecticut, but his brother's off to college, and it's just him and mom, and dad dies. Not long after that, mom starts an affair with Aaron's cousin's husband and moves him into the home.
Wow.
So his dad is dead. Now you have someone else in the home, and your brother, best friend, is gone off to college. And there's a whole lot of other stuff going on. But so once this happens, Aaron is very angry with his mother and starts spending time at the cousin's house, the cousin whom his mom is having an affair with her husband. The cousin's name is Tanya, and that's where a lot of the negative social influences are. She's letting him do all sorts of things. She's calling his mom and saying, basically, I'm his mom now. Tanya's the one that ends up hiding the car. She's also, while he's going through his trials, accused of trying to get his accomplices from Odin Lloyd's murder out of state. Like, she drives them out of state and buys them bus tickets. She's very, very loyal to Aaron. And this entire time while he's going through his trials, she's essentially dying of breast cancer. And she refuses to testify. She gets put in jail due to contempt. It's a very interesting relationship. I'd love to know more about that relationship. A lot of their phone calls are recorded and played in the documentaries, and Aaron's basically like, you can't die because I'm nothing without you, and here she is, clearly dying from breast cancer. So this all speaks, I think, to hopelessness as well as building when we talk about suicide being an outlet for someone. We have that. All of that layered all underneath that is the information that Aaron is struggling with his own sexual identity. And his high school quarterback is now, out in all of this, the documentaries and the podcast talking about their sexual relationship that they had in high school that they kept hidden. And so we start to look at the home, what messages are being sent about what it means to be a man from his father. The moment he has some sort of unmasculine mannerism, his dad's telling him not to act like a faggot.
Right.
There's a lot of...
And it wasn't even something... What I understood in reading that background was it was not only the times that he might have engaged in something that did not fit the dad's expectations of masculinity, but it was just sort of the run-of-the-mill way of antagonizing or torturing his children.
Sure.
Like, don't talk like a faggot, don't act like a faggot, don't walk like a faggot,
just the verbiage.
Don't stand there looking like a faggot. It was always kind of really compounding this homophobic rhetoric that in a young man, always, well, not always, but most of the time, unfortunately, metastasizes as this internalized homophobia where, you really just, you completely compartmentalize that side of yourself. And I'm happy that we live in a time where that happens a lot less than it used to. But if this is also heartbreaking, despite the crimes that he committed, which are horrific, the idea that in 2010, basically, he was experiencing this.
Sure. So, and we've talked about...
a little bit earlier than that, before his dad died.
We've talked about internalized homophobia before, and the self-hatred that brings for someone that is essentially being subjected to those negative viewpoints.
And there have been murders, which maybe that's a good episode, a topic for an episode, is men who have committed murder and based on somebody was going to out them. And there are plenty of
Right.
cases of that. I mean, like that's now it may not exist on its own as the motivating factor for murder, but it certainly
Well, and
is
that's a theory
motivation.
behind why he killed Odin, because of I never heard anything to really substantiate it, but the idea is, he's dating essentially his sister-in-law, and that maybe the person that Aaron's in a relationship with, kind of known as being the cover, where they're in a relationship since high school. She's kind of his high school sweetheart, and they have a child together, that Odin was kind of privy to the information that maybe...
Of what was really going on.
Yeah. So, of course, this is all added just for anything that we've described and what he's going through. Then add being in the spotlight in you can't find a more alpha male dominated
Absolutely.
sport. And there's also rumors that he left several letters at his suicide, that one of them was to his lover in jail. So I don't know. You talk about, like, was this about to come out? And so instead of being homicidal, he was suicidal. I just think it's all building up. A lot of what we talked about before, sort of the money, the fame, the ego, the celebrity, I think that is a factor in all of these things we're talking about. If we're talking about just piling it on, here we go.
Well, I'd also like to add that, we tend to think about these things in binary terms when we talk about gay versus straight, when there's actually an entire spectrum in between there.
Sure.
It's completely possible that he was, bisexual, pansexual, and just enjoyed sex. It could have been anywhere there. And like you said, just the comfort level he had with his high school sweetheart. Maybe she let something slip. Maybe it's used, or maybe it has nothing to do with it. And it doesn't have. We don't know if it has anything to do with that particular crime. It might. It might not. It's an interesting theory, but once again, we want to reiterate that it's unsubstantiated right now.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot of interesting, not necessarily like academic research, but articles out there about the pressure for celebrities, more so in the past, obviously, to not come out because of what it would mean for their career. Or does
absolutely.
it mean the money's going to dry up?
Right.
Or...
I mean, I used to work with an agent who would be so pissed off because one of her clients was going to come out, and she like, how dare, like, he's going to ruin his career and I'm going to lose my income stream. And I'm like, as a gay man myself, going, wow, okay, those are the things that you're willing to sacrifice in your moral makeup and on behalf of your client, because they're not just doing it to themselves, they're getting it from the publicist, from the agent, the manager, the producers, and the producers are thinking, this is
back to money,
this
right?
is our this is our uber alpha male lead of an adventure series or a high action series. We can't, he's a red-blooded American male. We can't have him be gay. We see some shift now, but it used to be, it was a death sentence for many careers.
Sure. So let's talk about CTE, or chronic traumatic encephalopathy. We used to term this punch drunk, if you've ever heard that term. But essentially it is a degenerative brain disease caused by repeated head injuries. And it is dementia, but with a different cause. So as we talked about earlier, you're going to see deterioration in cognitive functioning, the way people are thinking, the way that they're making decisions, the executive functioning Scott was talking about, and their impulsivity and being able to control that.
There may be memory problems involved, short-term memory.
Absolutely. Emotionally, more irritable, feeling more raw, depression, a lot of negative symptomology in terms of emotion. And then we see that out in the open by behavioral issues. So how they're interacting with other people or dealing with problems. But essentially they've found that of people exposed to multiple head injuries, the rate is about 30% of those. A third. That is incredible to me that they're suffering from CTE.
Yeah. Or will.
So there's 4 stages. The first stage is the first stage is going to include symptoms like attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, as well as confusion, disorientation, dizziness, headaches, things you think about when you're getting hit in the head. Second stage symptoms, memory loss, social instability, because it's starting to now affect relationships, poor judgment, acting before thinking. And then the third and fourth stages, progressive dementia. So we're talking about could be movement disorders, speech impediments, sensory processing disorders, tremors, deafness, vertigo, it sounds awful. And then severe depression and suicide at that point.
So beginning with some of the earlier symptoms, which could have been irritability, depression, confusion, right. It makes absolute sense that somebody would want to go towards trying to self-medicate those things with any substances they could get their hands on. So, again, copious amounts of weed. Right. There may have been irritability from the ongoing steroid use. It's just a number of things. It's just so many factors, and we may never know what did the heavy lifting unless somebody does. I mean, I don't know if they do an autopsy on his brain. Do we actually have pictures of his brain, or are we using? Okay.
Yeah.
So is that the comparison one you put up? Okay.
It's not the one that I put up. That's not him. But in the documentary, there's a doctor that is doing a presentation, and she shows his, and it's very similar. So, again, I think this perfect storm of factors are the social influences in his life, the substance use, the abuse. He was also, at least on one instance, his brother knows that he was sexually abused by an older kid in the neighborhood, the abuse by his father, the domestic abuse that he witnessed, the possibility of internal homophobia, the loss of his father. That's really when people say they saw a shift in him.
A change, yeah.
When you talk about that deadness in his eyes, that just they knew he was not going to be okay, and he was just different after that. And then head trauma, absolutely. I think it's a factor here. But I think my friend is right. I mean, there's clearly antisocial personality disorder markers that we can see. There's even an incident where when he was 17 and first went to Florida, where he punched a manager at a bar.
Right.
And, that was taken care of by the attorneys and was dropped. But, I mean, he really clocked this guy. He ruptured the inside of his ear. And so we can even see, before he's an adult, some conduct disorder stuff. Yeah,
I mean, I would, I don't want to necessarily disagree with your friend, because she's, right there in the middle of it. What I would offer is that, remember, we've talked about this in our episodes about sociopathy or psychopathy, is that, you can be born with those genetic markers that set you up for that pathway. But, children witnessing trauma, ongoing trauma, and being socialized to violent norms and interactions between their parents.
Right.
And criminality being, if not promoted, then sort of tacit enabling of those behaviors, then that's how you create a sociopath.
Sure.
And you send them mixed messages. I mean, it's certainly how you create really a spectrum of characterological disorders, is by constantly sending your child mixed messages.
Right.
So that they think they understand how they're supposed to act in this situation, and then you take an electrical cord and jam it into their head. That's a perfect example of how you can really rewire someone's brain.
Right, and exactly.
So nature versus nurture in this, we won't know, but definitely the behaviors reflect somebody that was willing to engage in that. So, of course, it seems like when anyone dies in jail now by suicide, there's a conspiracy that that's not what it actually was. So I just wanted to talk for a moment about stats of people who die by suicide in jail. And I also want to take a moment just to kind of talk about the terminology and how we're trying to change the lingo when we talk about suicide. If you notice, I'm not saying committed suicide. I either say death by suicide or died by suicide. And that's a conscious shift in our field to get away from stigmatizing it by using the word committed now, where we associate that with
committing crimes or being committed to a mental institution. That word has a very negative connotation. So you'll hear professionals in the field starting to move away from that. So died by suicide is the technical term, and don't ever say, this person was a suicide.
That's really bad.
That's really bad. Yeah. You wouldn't say so-and-so was breast cancer. You just don't call them by that. So I teach at the Jail Academy where I work, and I know you worked a long time in prison and jail systems, and there's a lot of good research out there about even local jails versus big prisons and suicidality, which I think is really interesting. So when he was when he was first arrested and taken to jail, they had him on suicide watch, which I think is great. It's a very responsible thing to do. The first 24 hours someone is in jail is a very high risk factor for suicide. It's the shock of being incarcerated. It could be the shame of the situation setting in, whatever they've been arrested for. Their stable support system might start to decrease a little bit, or they might start to think that it does. It's a very high rate of people that kill themselves within the first 24 hours. It's about, I think, 24%. And then if you look within the first week, 50% of people who kill themselves in jail do it in that first week. So that the impact of being incarcerated in confinement is real. The rate of suicides in jail are about 3 times higher than in the general community. 50% of the time, the individual is intoxicated when they do it. 23%, like I said, do it, or 24% do it within the first 24 hours. Where do you think they do it most often within the jail facility?
In the shower.
It's actually in their cell.
Oh, in their cell.
So 80% of them do it in their own cell. That's why if someone is suicidal, you should never leave them alone, because that is just completely isolating, and they have the time and the means to sort of put their plan together. What do you think the top method is?
Hanging.
Yeah, 93% do it by hanging. The top 2 causes of death in local jails are heart disease and suicide. And heart disease is the top killer for everyone. Yeah. But suicide is not the top killer for everyone. No. So obviously there's something unique about that situation. So aside from what we've already talked about was probably going on with him, he just got a life sentence. He has all these other factors that have led to how he has chosen to live his life. Social support, he talks with his brother after his arrest and talking about, like, we're going down to the local high school to pick up your plaques because they're taking your name off of stuff. And you can just hear, like, the crestfallenness in his voice of, like, what? At first, but then he laughs it off. He's essentially just kind of being erased from history. And
which probably didn't need to be communicated. I mean, I know his brother is probably hurting, but that's not necessarily the best thing that you communicate, which is something that is, again, talking about, on the other side, there's the individual who is incarcerated, and there's also the family members who completely don't understand this process either.
No.
And don't understand.
They're being traumatized as well.
They're being traumatized, and everybody, and what information pile are they going to pull from to know how to best communicate?
Right. So. And those with the most to lose, all of that funnels into hopelessness, which is the biggest risk factor for suicidal ideation, which you and I, working with pretrial clients, the more they had to lose, the more we were on high alert. Right. Because they really feel like they cannot come back from that, and look at everything that he lost. Yeah. So just to wrap up, the NFL has implemented a total wellness program as of last year, which sounds great. Again, you need people to take advantage of it, and I think they're starting to fight the fight of just battling the stigma of mental health. But they added, every NFL team has a licensed mental health professional that is at the facility. a dozen hours a week, not only just kind of looking for people with problems, but there to kind of be there if someone wants to talk to them or provide training and wellness programs for them. They have crisis hotlines. They have mentorship programs. Telehealth is available, financial counseling, intimate partner violence, education, summits and conferences and trainings and seminars.
Isn't it amazing to think that, like, this didn't exist already?
Well, and the NFL is one of the last to sort of hop on board because, like, MLB has had domestic violence awareness programs that they all have to go to mandatorily. NFL is pushed back for a long time, but I think they're starting to see the writing on the wall. But good for them that they have this in place now. It's going to be up to people to start utilizing it.
So, can I talk a little bit about suicide in incarceration settings?
Yes, please.
Excuse me. So, what I wanted to share about that, having worked in the prison system and in the jail system, is that there is, especially if you're in a jail, when you go to prison, there is a lot of pressure that comes off because it's a different kind of hopelessness that you deal with. But you're settling into a routine, whatever the length of your stay is in prison, whether it's life or relatively short term, you're settling into a new rhythm of life.
Your new normal.
A new normal. And there are some really difficult things about prison, and there are some awful prisons, and there are some states that have way worse prisons than others. But you're able to adjust in a way that being in jail is very difficult to adjust to, because being in jail does not have the physical freedom. You don't have as much ability to move around. You don't have access to the outside. You don't have some of the liberties that prisoners have, which keeps the tension and the anxiety and the depression and any other factors kind of thrumming at a higher frequency.
It's this temporary holding cell, but you have people coming and going all the time.
It's very
straight
chaotic. So the people that are coming in straight off the street cannot be stabilized. They might still be violent. They might be under the influence.
Right.
They might need stabilization. But having said that, with the relatively, significant episodes of suicide of celebrities while incarcerated, is that there's a process that if someone, many jail guards and prison guards that I know have been highly trained in recognizing all these factors, and you know what to look for. And if you don't, then you're not paying attention to the trainings, because these trainings are given over and over and over again. So anyone in his position should have stayed on suicide watch.
Absolutely.
It's absolutely shocking to me that he was not on suicide watch. And the way jails are set up is they're set up with what we call a partial panopticon setting, so that the people, the guards sit in a tinted window observation unit with over a 180 degree view into every single cell. So now, some of the cell doors have to be limited glass, because even the highest tempered glass can be broken, because you've got inmates in there that don't have anything better to do but figure out how to break that glass. But
they've been using steroids for years.
Absolutely. But there are some that are high observation housing versus sort of dorm housing, but there's always a constant watch. So I just want to bring up, I'm jumping out of athletes. I'm going to talk about Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah.
I'm going to be very upfront and transparent. I don't know if he killed himself. I honestly don't know.
Yeah.
But I will tell you this. He certainly had the motivation to, because narcissists, when they see no way out, have absolutely no compunction about taking it. I was like, well, I'm going to take control of this.
I agree.
I'm not going to let anybody run my narrative. That being said, every protocol that should have been in place was broken. Even though someone comes off suicide watch, you have a mental health professional that slowly and consistently assesses on a day-by-day basis as to what they can have back. Can they have shoelaces back? Probably not. Can they have towels back? Probably not. We're going to give them a non-terrible blanket and non-terrible clothing for 7 more days so that we can observe them. So the idea that Epstein had access, almost like he was just completely off suicide watch, given all of his access to these terrible and foldable and hanging materials, And you can get very creative about how you hang yourself. You don't have to be hanging from a door. You can hang from a doorknob. You can hang from anything where they can
just sit down and put pressure.
Absolutely, if you're willing to do it. What really makes this look particularly bad in Epstein's case is the lack of interaction by the guards. Nobody, in the jail I worked in, anybody that high profile would have been watched constantly, no breaks. And the idea that that camera was broken, I'm not going conspiracy theorist, I'm just not going to go there, but I'm going to tell you that there's a lot of things that just don't add up unless it was a horrific confluence of events, which I highly doubt. There's also the chance that he could have paid someone to take him out.
True.
He had enough money, he had enough access, that could have happened. When it comes to Hernandez, I really think that at some point, and they talk about this in the documentaries and some of the things you read, is that even in his worst behaviors at the end, there were still parts of him that were tender and boyish and boy-like and a need to attach to another person. And he may have felt that he was doing his girlfriend a favor. That if I take myself out, then this will all be over. It'll be all over for my family, whoever's left, whoever cares about me.
She and my baby will get my however much money.
They'll get the money and it'll be done. And he just couldn't, in his functioning, and he could not really kind of cognitively grasp likely the next 40 years of his life having to deal with this, not having a life.
Sure.
So two different examples. Suspicious. I think, obviously I don't think there's necessarily a conspiracy theory that I believe about Hernandez. Yeah. But Epstein, there's just too many factors. I don't know. I don't know if he did it or had someone do it or someone else did it. But
I think he's the perfect candidate to kill himself.
Yeah.
I really am not feeding into all the conspiracy stuff.
Yeah.
But
maybe he paid somebody off to hey, turn the cameras off because I'm going to do this.
Maybe.
And of course, being a pedophile, the lowest of the low in the system, these guards could have been, sure, let's let it happen. You're a piece of garbage. Who cares?
All right. Another one in the books.
Another one in the books.
All right. So Affluenza next.
Affluenza, and
let's do it.
And we have a couple of cult members, former cult members, that are volunteering to be interviewed that I'm very excited about. That'll be soon when you get back from Miami.
All right. Okay, you guys. We will see you next time on LA
Not So
Confidential.
Bye, folks.
Bye-bye.